Hello and welcome to GMParty, where we talk about games that we are making and, well, sometimes not making, but and we talk about stuff that gets in the way and help each other out. Right now, I have Mark Richardson and John Adamus joining us on the party. Why don't we do introductions first? John, go for it.
Awesome. I love going first. First is cool. I'm John Adamus. I'm the writer next door. What did I write in my lower third? I do stuff and tell stories. I am the creator of Noir World and soon to be the guy making Writer's Room as soon as I go back and work more on it. That sounds good. We'll go with that.
My name is Mark Richardson. I'm the proprietor of Green Hat Designs. Yeah, so I write role-playing games and I do cartography for role-playing games. I've published my first game called Headspace, which is a shared consciousness cyberpunk game powered by the apocalypse, and working on new games, which are completely driving me massively insane. And yeah, I guess, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be all like any award-winning cartographer, I should say.
Yes.
Now that I have that stamp.
For what game are you in any award-winning person?
Yeah, see, I'm so bad at self-promotion. I do all the
well, we're going to work on
the
that.
7th Sea role-playing game.
And is that just one piece of cartography, or is that many pieces of cartography?
Many pieces. John knows me quite well, so.
Yes, and you do suck at self-promotion.
Oh.
That's fair. I know that well. I am also equally bad. Well, maybe not equally bad. I am sufficiently bad. So I'm, for those who are new to the show, which is probably everyone, I am Andy Verdan, and I run this crazy show. I have been in the video game development industry for 18 some odd years now, but only relatively recently gotten into tabletop design and development. So far, I've released one game called Pungeons and Flagons, a ridiculous little mini game about telling puns in a tavern. It's ridiculous. Yeah, that's a good word for it. But we'll be talking about some new games.
John's got a huge thing for puns, I should have you know.
I do. Puns are amazing.
I did send him the link to the Pungeons and Flagons. I should get you a copy or something. Test it out.
Yes, you should. Puns are great.
So is that like a PDF game right now, or
yeah, it's a single page micro game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was sort of a joke that ended up as a game.
A lot of games end up that way, to be honest. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, my game, like Headspace, started as it started originally as a really terrible game for Game Chef, and it was really, really bad. But and then I went to Gen Con, and Eloy LaSanta kind of was like, okay, pitch your idea. And I was like, oh, and then it described it, and everybody thought it was pretty cool. So that put me on a 3-year journey to making a game and publishing it and learning all about the wonderful world of publishing, which is, you know, equal parts rewarding and some sort of descent into hell and madness. So, I mean, it's the sales pitch of getting into do-it-yourself publishing as an indie designer is really tricky because you have to know so many different things. And at the beginning, you know none of them. So it's a lot of trial and error and talking to other people so that you don't make errors.
That's kind of why we're here, helping each other with those errors that we will inevitably make. So what we usually do is we go through the 3 questions of what you're working on, what you have been working on, and what's in your way. We can do it a number of different ways. We can take turns and answer all 3 questions. One person answer all 3 questions, next person answer all 3 questions, or we just answer one at a time. Democratize it a bit. So how about we start with that? We'll do, what are you working on right now? Personally, I am working on a game called Mic Drop, and it's so picture the movie Spinal Tap, but you've taken all the ridiculous improv nature of Spinal Tap and all those interviews that happen with Rob Reiner, take all those interview prompts and hand them to one person or a deck. The interview prompts are then posed to the rest of the players who play the band on the album tour that is on fire and going straight to hell. Not necessarily literally, but maybe. The train wreck of an album tour is played out on social media. So the band, the players, make characters as members of the band, and they post their answers to the questions posed by fake Rob Reiner to Twitter, and they have infighting and all sorts of ridiculous events that they have to deal with. This is played out in real time over the course of a month. Day happens, event happens, day happens, event happens, and you respond to that in turn. That is basically the elevator pitch of the game. It's a very long elevator ride.
Well, they all start somewhere, right? You know, and I mean, I think every game starts with a shitty pitch. So, you know, like it takes a long time to get it somewhere good. And even then, like, I remember with Headspace, like the back of my book is like just sprawling text. It's not a good rear cover text, you know. So I need to fix that, you know, amongst a million things. So, you know, it's the less words are the hard part, right? So
yes.
You know, so I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, definitely you need to shorten the pitch up, but so is the game like, so it's like it almost sounds kind of like not a mud, but like a mush, like except played via over social media.
Yeah, the idea is it's kind of like Twitter LARP, I guess. I don't know,
Okay.
Alternate reality game kind of deal. I was also thinking that it would play well as a tabletop game as well, so having the 2 modes. So I actually just loaded up the my notes. The actual elevator pitch for it is a game that follows a month in the life of a dumpster fire of a band on a train wreck of an album tour.
That is a better pitch.
It is a better pitch. I just didn't have it in front of me. But yeah, the idea is the tabletop variation. The prompts are cards, and you draw that, and it's a GM-less sort of experience, and you deal with a situation that is provided by the card, and you discuss that as a band, and deal with the scenario. Whereas the play by social media, it's done, one prompt is posted one per day.
So do you think, like, to me in some ways it sort of sounds like, okay, well this could be totally wrong, but like to me it sounds, I mean, as an RPG designer, I'm thinking maybe the primary should be the RPG, and then the secondary should be, this is how you play the game on social media. Just mostly because from a playtest standpoint, it's really hard for people to test things over the course of a month.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was sort of what I was running into. I did run a test of it over the course of a week, and it highlighted a number of things, that being one of them. So it was difficult to get that sort of rapid turnaround.
There's a game called, have you ever played a game called Inspectors?
I have it. I have not played it.
Okay, so Inspectors is like basically like it's a Ghostbusters reality TV kind of thing. And so, you know, you do scenes where you go bust ghosts, and you obviously play like a group of people in some, you know, like no one should really be in this profession. And you go do things, and then they do like kind of cutaway scenes where it's like people can accomplish certain tasks by sort of standing out of camera and having like an interview segment where it's sort of like The Office, where they're like, and then we were down that hallway and wait, oh, is this explicit or?
Oh, the show?
Yeah. It's just good to know.
Yeah, it doesn't particularly matter at this point. I can't monetize this until I get way more views anyway. So, okay. Whatever.
So, no, I just wanted to know. So, yeah,
I would say,
I catch myself.
Don't go up.
No, I'm not going to. I'm Canadian, okay? But, like, I'm a salty Canadian sometimes. So, no, so in Inspectors has a really interesting mechanic to that, which is that it sort of pulls the viewer out and does that Office style, like, you know, the band was totally going to screw us over kind of thing. But then, you know, and so you could do like variations of that where you could have like spotlight scenes where people can do things in that scene, like this, where you break the fourth wall down about what's going on. And like one person, it would be the opportunity for someone to sort of interject story, because they would be in a scene and they'd be like, well, so the reason, you know, we were all at that trailer camp drunk on moonshine is, you know, or something like that. And then, like, so you know, somewhere between that and like Fiasco could be really interesting.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas. I usually find with games is look at other games and, you know, steal liberally from them.
Yeah, well, you know, stealing from one is plagiarism. Stealing from many is research, right?
See, now I'd come at this a totally different way. I think the tabletopness of it is irrelevant, but I also think the amount of time it takes to play needs to be way shorter. Here's why. Because if I'm on social media and nope, we're going to rewind that a minute. The amount of work I have to do to equip myself to do so is not as simple as I get a pencil, I get a piece of paper, and I write. Actually, I should sit up because that's where the thing is. So if I have to be on social media with an account and I'm only doing one thing over the course of 30 days, that's a pain in the neck. Right. What's gonna make that compelling on day 17 if I've got like a bajillion other things going on and I gotta remember to do it? And what's my response? How do I measure what's good, what isn't? How do I know what's acceptable, what isn't? How do I know if I've done it right? And how do I know because social media is a singular person activity, right? Like I can say, oh, I'm talking to Andy and Mark, but ultimately it's just me writing it, right, and then everybody else reading it. So if I'm giving, if I'm taking my turn, whatever that looks like, and I'm on social media posting what I imagine would be a tweet or a Facebook status update, it's going to be really flat, and it requires all my players to follow me. And somehow I've got it. You're asking a lot of the player is the shorthand, and then you are, because just because it's played over a month doesn't mean it needs to be play tested in like real time. You could easily go, all right, let's just do over the next hour. Let's just knock questions out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pretend they're different days. Playtesters should be able to grapple with that, unless but that's because I don't. Based on your pitch, it doesn't sound like the time span matters so much as what they do in the time span. Does it really matter if it's day 9 or day 11 if I'm going to tell you the really exciting story about how the bus, derailed into a cornfield? That's just my end of it. So I would put the tabletopness of it to one side and go, oh, I've got this really novel, interesting hook that requires people to sort of build little online conversations. And they're very yes and. They're very sort of, I take this and run with it, and then you take it and run with it. It's very sort of Baron Munchausen in a kind of way. And I'd lean super hard into it. Like, I'd go way in. And if there were cards, then, well, honestly, for social media, I wouldn't use cards. I would just generate prompts based off of like a single PDF, like take 10 of these questions and go. And then have that be, because you need a set number of turns. That way you wouldn't be dependent on the number of days. And then I would just wind it up and go. Rather than, because if you had cards and you were the only one who had cards, what am I supposed to do as, your pretend drummer who wants to play, who wants to participate, but I don't have the same level of engagement? That's just my thinking from a totally different, like, oh, this is intentionally different than like, I'm going to roll 3d6 and I'm going to move some stuff and say a thing, and then somebody else is going to do the same thing. I would lean into the newness. Super new. Because that sounds like fun. I would love to be sort of the Spinal Tap, fourth replacement alternate bassist who can only play 2 notes because he's used to Guitar Hero. I'd like that. I would like that a lot more, because it's not, oh, this is my character sheet, here are my dice. It looks on some level like 95 other things I could play. It's a good idea with a good pitch that's presented in a way that's totally different. I think that's going to grab way more people, not just from a playtest working standpoint, but also just this is fun and new. Nothing ever, I don't have a whole lot like this outside of like ARGs and some full on like immersion LARPs. That's great. That there should be more stuff like that.
Yeah, if you wanted to go totally more into the social media, like you could have cards that are just image files that you attach to begin your events or whatever, and then that way everyone could have access to a pool of image prompts. Thus you would have like maybe some art that was like setting the stage or something like that, and then the questions could be on the images or something like that. I think you would want to have, from a social media perspective, like the things that I can think of is obviously it would be like begin every game. Like at the first thing you do at the beginning of the game is turn the band's name into a hashtag, so that you can track the conversation.
Oh yeah.
So like hashtag Death Walrus or something like that, and then that way people can follow the conversation. That way also other people can follow, because I mean the whole reason why social media engagement is interesting to play that game from a social media perspective is it's not just about the 3 of us playing some weird meta LARP thing. It's about other people who are interested in our shenanigans, right? So, I mean, if they can follow along on a hashtag, then they can essentially storyfy our game. And then at that point you have people who are like, it's sort of like be like a way of describing it. It's sort of like a very encapsulated sort of Twitch experience, almost. So like it's different, it's weird. It would be strange because it would allow you to like you essentially would tag the hashtag, and that would show you the game. So you would probably actually hashtag like the name of your game _ their band, and then that way people could see it or something like that. And you could have like a website with indexes of people's experiences, or like check out this hashtag and you can see the entire playtest. So things like that would be interesting. I mean, there's all sorts of things I would, yeah, like if you go social media, like I think John's right in the sense that if you're going to go one or the other, like games that try to do everything are not good at anything. You know, your game does every game does one thing well, and the goal is to get that one thing to be as good as it possibly can. So like the novel, interesting, you know, John's right. Like if you go with the RPG angle, you know, you're making a play on games that do exist. If you go with the Twitter angle, or like, I mean, essentially it's it would be a hashtag game, I guess. I don't know. So, you know, then you have something that can work in Twitter, it can work in Facebook, it can work in G+, it can work in basically anything that has a hashtag, which is everything. You could play the game on Instagram. So or like you could Snapchat your band experiences. So, you know, there's all sorts of things you could do that I think would be really engaging and weird. And you could even have, I mean, the game could totally have a capacity for like crowd events, i.e., you know, people interfere with the hashtag and like posit certain things that happen or something like that. You know, take advantage of if there's longer play times. Like if you go with, I really feel like I would probably have an option to have it play out over several days. But I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, would probably be more engaged in it if it was like, let's play out a scene or something. Like I don't know, like I think
like a certain
like
number of scenes. It needs some boundaries. It needs like a box to operate in, because while it is compelling to say tune in tomorrow for the next day of our, you know, road trip, that's a long time to wait for a very little thing. Like if I'm waiting 24 hours for one tweet, that better be just an amazing tweet, right? Like I'm super down for Death Walrus. I think that's an awesome band name. But if I know my tweet's going to be at 9:01 every morning, right around 9:15, I'm going to wonder what the hell else I'm going to do with my day.
Right.
I think it needs boundaries beyond, like more. When I say beyond, I mean like more specific than just like, it plays over 30 days. If it's, you know, 10 questions or 7 scenes or some concrete number, I got to remember the cameras right here, so because I tend to gesture in the same space. Something that gives us boundaries that isn't like big broad time lets us, because if I want to play your game, I need a whole month to sit down and like play. I got because even if it were look at our regular D&D campaigns that we all run with friends, those take place over a month, but even those are just, you know, at best maybe 4 weeks, you know, 4 weeknights in a month. So months are really big.
You have that much time?
Well,
let's assume it's a weekly game and it plays, you know, 2 hours, 2-3 hours.
Glorious.
That's just how we do it over here in Jersey. I don't know about you guys.
So that makes me think of bringing it back actually to Spinal Tap, where it's Rob Reiner asking questions about things that happened previously in the band's career.
Yeah.
That would be great. So time is not a factor suddenly at all. It's like, this happened. Right. How did you deal with it?
Yes. Remember that time the thing caught on fire in the middle of your solo? What was that like? Go.
Yeah.
And that way you're also sort of divorced from the need to have it mechanized. Because I'm just going to tell you a story. And I don't need a whole lot of boundaries other than, oh, John, in your story you can never kill someone. I'm gonna make something up. You know, you can never like kill someone, and you can never like, I don't know, violently attack a potted plant. Great. Okay, those are my boundaries. I can still do a lot with the stage burning down behind me. Cool. It makes it easier for you from a production side too.
And everything that a fellow player said before you, well, that happened.
It counts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just internal consistency, right? Like it's very much like you know, play by post iteration of Fiasco, like to sort of turn it into ways that I might recognize something like this. I mean, I think in some ways, you know, like it's weird. It's weird enough that it's different, right? And I think the tricky thing is the hard thing I think with your design will be figuring out what those magic boundaries are that make the game really engaging, and make it fun to both play out a thing or because I think one of the things is you want to have some interchange between people, right? And I mean, one advantage with social media is we're not all on at the same time. I mean, sometimes Twitter feels like one big, you know, fire hose chat text, but other times it's like this majorly broken telephone where, you know, John and I can have a big back and forth, and then like 5 hours later, I'm asleep and somebody starts chatting to John and picking up the conversation wherever the hell we left off.
Yeah.
And so I think that's certainly like I think definitely from a social media perspective, like it has to be like, you know, when it occurs, and it can be as long as it happens to be or what have you. Like I think if you like try to limit people's creativity to like single tweets or like you get 3 tweets, people will spend more time thinking about what they're going to say than coming up with something cool to say, if that makes sense. Or like trying to like people will overly mechanize it, you know, like they'll be like, I only get 3 tweets and I gotta make them good, right? You know.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I found that with first playtest, they were assuming, the players were assuming one answer, one tweet, rather than just going with it, which was challenging. But yeah, I think opening it up and getting rid of the time factor and scheduling factor will make for better stories, really.
Yeah, it sounds really cool, though.
Yeah.
I would totally play this. Oh, I would super play this.
Good luck. I'm happy. I'm not designing it. So that's usually what I like to say. That or I'm so happy you're... Well, actually, the much more positive way of saying that is I'm so happy you're making this so I never have to. You know, like I'm a big-time cartographer and I love maps. But you know, I don't see any reason to bother making a map game because Avery Alder already made it with A Quiet Year, and as far as I'm concerned, that's like the perfect map game. So I'm like, good, I don't have to do that. I can free up my brain for other things, hopefully anyway. Although I am, of course, you know, I have an idea of a map game or games that involve maps. I can't stop that, but I can at least, you know, not do that one thing.
Very cool. All right, you guys have given me lots to talk about or think about, write down, work on. There we go.
Yes.
So who's next?
Do it for Death Walrus.
Death Walrus. Yes, Death Walrus will be immortalized forever.
Yes, as it should be. As it should be.
It's like this.
Oh yeah. Walrus. Killer.
Brutal.
That T-shirt will sell at Hot Topic. Absolutely. I'll go next because I'm less produced than Mark, so I'm going next. I'm producing Writer's Room, which ultimately, eventually, well, in theory, it won't take the same production timeline that Noir World did for years. Hopefully. Who knows? But Writer's Room right now is the card game where up to 6 players so far will be able to sit down and try to map out what's called a story Bible and a season-long look at a very popular television show of their own design, where they will dictate the protagonist, the antagonist, the location, all the stuff that goes into what makes a story. Secretly, I'm going to slip narrative design ideas into this game. And the good thing is that's as far as I've gotten. I know it's a card game. I know it's got some pieces. I don't know the first darn thing about card mechanics. I know this game is not the love child of Flux and Once Upon a Time that I said it was in November, because having now played both those games like 24 times, my thing doesn't feel like either of those things. So yeah, that's kind of the space I'm hanging out in. I'm now trying to figure out what I actually want to make, and mostly what it doesn't have, so that I know what it will have. So yeah, it's cool. No, it's no worries. So yeah, that's what's up.
I don't know. I mean, constraints are obviously the first thing. Like I'm with you there, that you need to have, like, otherwise it's just the ocean is too big.
Well, that was the lesson I learned with Noir World, where it was like, I'm not going to worry about constraints. I want to make sure this game has all the parts I want it to have. That was way too many parts. Like, it became unwieldy, and it became impossible to explain to somebody, and it made it less interesting ultimately. It just became this sort of exercise in, wow, you're doing a lot when you play this game. That's doing a lot does not always equate to fun. It just means you're busy. And that's not what I want out of my gaming experience. So I had to, like, I learned pretty quick in the course of tons of drafts. Like, oh, make it fun and pare down the stuff. And do I really need, you know, where should I put a boundary? Do I really need this? Is that fun? Does that help? Or is it just nice to talk about?
So is the game played with cards?
Right. Well, the camera is currently balanced on my box of blanks. But yes, it is a card game. Well, it's because I'm at a funny height in the room. So yeah, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. It is it's the same design philosophy I took to Noir World, which was, I play games. I like games. I don't know the first thing about really doing this, so I have no assumptions other than, in the end, I know people will play cards on a table, and they will be face up, and there will be a winner.
So, single deck,
so far, yes, but the size of that deck seems to be something I can't get a consistent answer on. I've tried 52, I've tried 60, I've tried 135. Currently, I'm at 96. But the more people I talk to about how big a deck should be, I get different answers. So I don't know if there's like a math thing involved.
Well, what are you trying?
I don't know, and I don't know how big a card game's supposed to be. Like, I don't know how you. Yeah, it's got to matter though, because otherwise your answer could be 500.
Okay, love letters 18 or something, right? So.
Right. How do you choose the number of cards?
Yeah, like, I mean, I would say don't worry about the number of cards in your game until you have a game.
Now, so you're the first person to tell me that.
Because if your game, you know, if your game turns into Love Letter as an example, then you're gonna have like all of 18 cards, because maybe the game's like each card is unique. We're gonna play it out, and then when we cycle through the 10 cards in the deck, we're done. That could be the game, and there wouldn't be anything wrong with that.
That's true. That's true.
I would say, like, some of the things with cards, because I'm doing stuff with cards, so I've thought a lot about cards, and like you know, so you're making your own cards. You're not using poker cards, right?
No, I am making my own in a, well, right now, I'm referring to all my pre-tests as ransom type cards because I'm literally pasting.
Because I have like 100,000 decks in my house right now, thanks to my game. So.
Well, la-di-da.
No, I know, but it's hell, really. But, so, okay, so you have a lot of freedom because you're doing that. In some ways, you have too much freedom.
Yes, that would be the constant John struggle. Way too much freedom leads to meandering thought that eventually I have to kind of pen back in. What Metatopia taught me was that I need to really figure out what the hell this thing is and then make decisions. So that's really where I've been for the last, 5 weeks, 4 weeks, however long Metatopia was ago, a month. It doesn't feel like a month, but yeah, it's just
it has been. It feels like it's been a lot longer.
It has been.
So what are the contents of the cards that you're currently thinking of?
All right, so right now, here's what I know I want. Because it's the basics of storytelling, right? So you're going to need protagonist, antagonist, location, some sort of plot element or elements because they need to do something. I also want some sort of card that affects the greater meta play around the table. Right now, I'm calling them network notes because they're the ability for, like, if the three of us are playing and I play this one card, then it's everybody passes all their cards to the left. Because the one thing I learned about Noir World that became my favorite is that when you build a multiple player development thing and you get multiple players interacting in ways beyond just we're role-playing characters at the table, you make for more interesting stories when you do get into it. And I want to have that sort of fluidity and that dynamic change on cards available, rather than have you think of the idea and then in the idea me also figure out a way to subvert it, alter it, or change it. I like that kind of let's play around with what it means to be a card game. So I have these admittedly slightly lofty plans, but they're not very concrete. So that's really where I've been sitting with this stack of moleskin notebooks. Oh, I could try this, and what about this, and play this, and do this.
Okay, so as a constraint,
yes,
is
please.
the game about improv, or is it about storytelling?
Right.
Now, so the reason I say the two differences to that is improv tends to have interrupt your activity with a prompt that makes you go, oh, well, how do I get like how do I get keep going on with the same thing? How do I get a walrus into my story? So like then I have a card that has animal on it and it or something like that as a prompt.
Right.
And so I fish it out and I name something and I give it to you. Or is the game about building a story together? So it's like I have to come up with something to do with a walrus and bring that into the game, as opposed to this is how I'm causing trouble.
Well, right now, it's sitting more firmly in storytelling than improv. I like your distinction. I think that distinction totally works. I think that makes sense. It's currently sitting very much in storytelling more than improv, although, yeah, I'm not a fan of interruption. I'm not a fan of I've got the strategy, maybe not strategy, that's maybe too firm a word, but if I'm going through things, the ability for somebody else to come and go, not anymore, you're not, and kind of upend my apple cart, that to me is less fun if I'm on the receiving end. It reminds me of being a little kid playing like Uno. Like I'm doing well, and all of a sudden someone plays a reverse, and it's mutter curse, stupid game, and I lose all the momentum. But that's maybe just a me thing. But I think I want to have it live in the storytelling space. Ooh, excuse me. More so than improv, because I don't want interruption, and I don't want I'm not a fan of like the come up one over the top. Well, you said walrus. I'm going to say 2 walruses.
So
it doesn't get me anywhere.
okay, so what if the game is okay, this is just my mental analogy. What if the game what if your protagonist in the game is no one that is at the table? The protagonist is a third party, and functionally, if the story is a mountain, we're gonna roll the protagonist down the mountain, and as each player does a thing, they play a card, which is the next hurdle or whatever that our central hero must overcome. And so that so you have essentially, I mean, if you think about it, like he's a rag doll and he rolls down the hill. And so if no one does anything, he rolls down to the bottom of the hill and he's beat up, but it was pretty boring since we just watched a guy roll down a hill. It was funny for 5 minutes and then we're like, wow, I think he's dead. But then, you know, if you had, I don't know, whether your story prompts are obstacles that this person has to overcome, and maybe you could have things like, you know, so essentially whoever has the lead of the scene probably has to, they have to creatively come up with ways that the protagonist is overcoming whatever obstacle was set in their place. So maybe somebody else, you know, maybe it's my turn. So the person, so when your turn ends, you set the obstacle for the next person. And I mean, this would be a cooperative storytelling game. So it's more like we're all trying to make a really interesting story, not screw everything up for us.
No, I get you.
And this is obviously just this is just
fine.
So you could have,
it's great.
You could have, you know, the cards could represent obstacles. There could be cards that represent how to get around them. You know, essentially cards that change the terrain and where things are taking place, because he's only, you know, metaphorically rolling down a cliff. You could have some kind of, if you wanted, you could have some grander kind of story structure. You know, I think some games you might want to think about, and this is weird, but you should really give Fall of Magic a closer look.
Okay. It's in the other room.
Like, so think about Fall of Magic, except instead of as a scroll that you roll out and tell this story as somebody moves through this, and you're like following them. Instead of a scroll, you have, say, a deck of cards or something like that, right?
Ooh. Yeah, I'm gonna put that down on my to-do tomorrow list.
One I wanted to bring up Laura Simpson's Companion's Tale.
Yeah,
it has it features like the separate protagonist thing that Mark mentioned. The people around the table are playing the companions of the hero that did the thing, or the hero that did this thing. And I believe that there is a card component to the game at some point. I did back it. I don't think that cards have shipped. I don't even remember. I may have gotten the PDF copy out of it. But yeah, I definitely look into that. There might be some things in there that might work or not work. But it does, having that target for your stories, I think, is a strong idea.
Yes. So I have now literally 3 times as many pages of notes as I had all week. So thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, like, you know, Baron Munchausen and some of the staples there. Like, you could have, you know, so yeah, it would depend on, like, I think you need to obviously set some constraints in terms of, well, are the cards changing theme or things like this, or I think you would probably be better off with some kind of conversation, or like if you wanted, you could have the cards, because you can have multiple things on the same card, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So you know, if if you took a tact of any card can be played in any situation, and say all cards can do 5 different things, and maybe there are just 5 different plays on the same thing, right? So there's like, you know, okay, I can't think of how that would work, but anyway, so
I think I see where you're going.
So then that way it's sort of like, well, if I'm the antagonist in this scene, then I play a card and this represents my antagonist. But in somebody else's scene, I can just as easily play this card and I'm the aid for the protagonist or something like that.
Right.
And I think you could, for starting the game, you could very easily go, okay, well, what kind of story do we want to play? Do we want to do a hero's journey? Do we want to do a fall from grace? Do we want to, you know, and you could very easily pick like the top 5 story arc of all, you know, of all time. And I mean, if you wanted, you could have like cards tailored to those, but and if you think you are, what I would say is limit yourself now.
Right.
So like pick like I don't know, like any game about a story has to be able to do a hero's journey.
Yeah.
So it's lazy, sure, but I would like make a game that tells a hero's journey. Because once it does that, once you do that, then you can do anything. You know, because you can do something else. Then you're tweaking a hero's journey into a fall from grace. So now we're going, well, you're a king, and now you're going to lose everything because of your terrible decisions. So
right.
You know, start with one thing and then go to the next. This is something I learned with my game that I'm working on, which I can juxtapose into now if you want.
Segue. You're not juxtaposing. You're segueing.
Yeah, segueing.
It makes a difference. Words matter.
Yeah, I know. I just went off on a big tear today about how much I hated one particular word. So, which is drip, because I think it's a terrible thing to call a business. But
drip is in the drip is good. I like drip.
Nothing good drips. That's all I'm gonna say. So
coffee.
So anyway, so my game that I'm working on right now is called Treads. And it is a role-playing game designed to replicate the feeling of the individuals of a single Sherman tank at the height of World War II. So you play a crew. One of the core tenets of this game is that the game does not allow personal heroic sacrifice exactly like as traditionally it has been inclined by so many different games. In this game, you will live or die together. So you, as a group, you sort of persevere as best as you can and hopefully overcome. And if you can't, then you will all make the ultimate sacrifice. But not sort of no individual one person is going to throw themselves on the hand grenade in this game and save the party. The game uses cards. Part of the reason to do that, there's always the question of like, well, why cards or why not dice or why not anything? And I mean, part of that is just sort of design and aesthetic. For myself with Treads, I went with normal poker cards, or yeah, I guess normal deck of 52 cards. And the main part of it was initially I was thinking is as a crew-based game, and I really wanted to reinforce crew-based ideas, you're working together for a common goal, and it's much easier and much more tactile to have something that represents the thing that you're doing and give that to someone else to help them. Like taking +1 forward is by itself boring as shit. It doesn't get me more engaged. But if I have a card in my hand that says you get a 7 to do something, and I take it from my hand and I give it to John's character, and they take the 7 and they go off and do something else, I can see on this sort of game how this plays out. For a game like this, I obviously need, well, not obviously need, but I want a combat component. I want part of the game to be about the battles themselves. I want to have a bit more I want a bit more mud and blood in the game than say the broader narrative structure that encompasses a game like say Night Witches, where you play, everybody does a few things and then you describe like a grand combat. I wanted to do something more about, a little bit more crunchy. I don't mind that in my game. So like a bit more, your individual actions in this crew matter. And you're making decisions, and combat is a frenzy of action. And so like, combat playing kind of like, like you would play out a combat scene and it would be, a thing. And then between combat, right now I'm looking at having essentially combat scenes, company scenes, which are functionally downtime, and then sort of interstitial role-playing scenes, kind of using essentially my game is I'm taking elements that I like from Blades in the Dark, from Powered by Apocalypse, from Fate Accelerated, and sort of bundling them together and using cards. And it has been a tremendous learning experience, and one filled with peril and mostly a lot of frustrations, because cards are completely different than dice. And I've learned a lot on this journey. Like, cards are not dice. Never even begin thinking about them the same way. That will not help you. Like initially I started with this perverse idea that cards were like pre-rolled dice, and that carries a little bit, but not really. I mean, the big thing with the game, like one thing that was really pointed out to me about card games versus dice games is if I roll a d20 and in my game a natural 20 is very important or very, very powerful. I can roll a d20 for 1,000 years and never actually get a 20. I mean, odds are I will eventually get a 20, but if we're playing out today's game, it is completely possible I will never roll a 20. So if anything in my game hinges on me getting a 20, I've already set this game up to fail. And we can do modifiers and change things about that. But with card games, you are essentially expending resources in a limited pool. If you have cards and one of those cards is a 20, you will get a 20. We can guarantee this. So the 20 will come up. What will you do with it? And doesn't matter when you do get it. So, and then there's all sorts of different, I mean, I can go on about cards till the cows come home about how I've been thinking about this. The core idea, I would just talk, geez, I haven't even explained like mechanics and bits. It's a big game. One of the core pieces of engineering that I'm putting into it is the tread itself. So basically people have cards in their hand, they play cards, they lead with a card to do something. And then essentially they can combine, they can take cards from other players to try to get a higher result and succeed in whatever their actions are. If the cards in your hand suck, you can take cards from the tread, which is a common pool of 5 cards that represents the esprit de corps of your crew. So the tread is both physical, that is in combat, and the tank takes physical damage. The tread is damaged, you lose access to these cards. But it is also metaphorical. It represents your je ne sais quoi of a team, your esprit de corps, your morale. And so in role-playing scenes, it is just as likely to get damaged or can be repaired then. The game will have a physical sheet representing the tank itself. And right now I'm mostly focused on the combat element of the game. Going back to what I was saying to John, I mean, I know the game's going to have a role-playing game component, and I know the game's going to have a combat mechanic. And I need something, but I have to start somewhere. And Ken Hite told me when he play tested this, he was like, well, make the this seems like you have something that works, but make the combat work And then when that's done, you can go back and go, how do I turn this combat engine into a role-playing engine, or how do I make these two tie together? But essentially, I was putting myself in endless circles trying to make everything work all at the same time, and that was never going to happen. But I'm trying to remember the game. I took a bit of a break from the design of it. Yeah, so basically, you play a card. And you try to get a number to succeed, and you can take cards from support. So like in the combat system of the game, the different people have crew positions that allow them to use cards differently. So the commander, as your leading officer, is telling everybody what to do in the tank. So a lot of their responsibility on their turn is giving their cards to other players and telling them what to do with it. And then you have people like the driver who's going to play cards to try to change the position of the tank on the battlefield. You have the gunner who's going to be shooting the guns, shooting one of the guns anyway. You have the loader, and the loader actually has a pretty fascinating core position in the game, which is that the cards are the effectiveness of damage in this game, so that you physically load the cards onto the tank template, and then they get fired by another player. So like the loader takes cards from their hand, puts it in that sort of represents the shell, and then on the gunner's turn, those stack of cards is used to do the damage to your opposition forces. I have a big sheet that represents the tank that makes some of this a lot easier to explain. So yeah, as John said, the game's a lot bigger, a lot more moving pieces, I guess.
I like the tactile nature of it, using the tank as a playboard.
Yeah, a lot of that I came with I guess baggage from Headspace, where I had like a central element in the middle of the table that people use to track play, and it was, to be honest, I think one of the more popular components of the game. Because it brought everybody, it engaged everybody right then and there. And in playtests of this game, the same thing was happening. Like people were like, okay, I'm doing a thing and I can immediately see how that's being added to everybody else's actions.
And with a crew-based team, a vehicle-based crew, I guess, more accurately, the vehicle really does take on like a personality of its own. Having something concrete to represent that on the table, I think, is very like focusing.
Yeah, so I mean that's the hope. Like right now, the combat engine is actually singing fairly well. It's like it seems to be working and doing the thing that I kind of want it to do. And part of this, I think part of the hurdle that I face is balancing, complexity. Like one of the things I thought was interesting about the game is that there's a lot going on, but because you have, as long as you keep it consistent with the cards, like this is a hard game to explain without showing cards and stuff like that. But it helped everybody. Like I explained it and I've only sort of long pitched this like 4 times and played 4 variations, and we went as far as a few rounds of combat of smoking a panzer tank and almost driving over some infantry in one of the games. So, but the play of it it felt like that thing. Some of the decisions were mattering. People could role play. Like there were role playing elements that were coming out of the combat itself, which was cool. Like I expect the role playing elements to be in the combat part of the game to be like very similar to pretty well every other game that we play. Like the role playing kind of comes out of that. In terms of I'm thinking about in the broader scope of the game about trying to have some kind of sort of company action where thinking about sort of what goes on with Blades in the Dark, of telling the story of this tank moving across the front during the war. And so, you know, starting the story in, say, Great Britain, and then you land in Utah Beach and you follow the 70th Armor Battalion, you know, on its march towards Berlin. And, you know, maybe our story will end early because everybody will die terribly, but the story of the company continues. And so we can pick up where last we left off with another tank. If we want to continue the same sort of story, we can do different things. Who knows? Or we just end the game. I don't know. Yeah, that's like a lot, but
well, Mark,
there's a lot going on with it. Sure.
There's a question you've generated here in the course of this. If you can pick up the let's call it the story, right? If you can pick up the story just by switching tanks, then the game is less focused on these specific 5 beings in this one vehicle and more focused on what the overall group of tanks is supposed to be doing mission-wise. So the question I think I'm driving towards is it about these 5 people specifically in their tank?
Okay, yeah. So let me backpedal there. That was me more spitballing.
Done. Okay, fair.
So to roll it back, like I want the game to be about the 5 people in this tank, and so the company is more like a way of doing downtime elements and role playing elements that pull you out of the tank. I mean, it is the Second World War, so I mean, a lot of this is blowing shit up, and I'm fine with that. And I'm fine with some crunch in that. Like, this is certainly not going to be the indie. Like, I know outright this is not going to be the indie RPG for everybody, but that's okay. Like, I would figure out, like, I don't know, like in my personal understanding of crunch in games. Like, I've Burning Wheel and Burning Empire is like, you know, I'm trying to get the fit high, and then, you know, Fiasco being very low. And I'm not planning on either. Probably something, you know, I guess where there's about as much going on as in a game of Fate Core, or maybe a bit more than that, you know, like, you know, certainly well, it has some of the structural bits of Powered by the Apocalypse, mostly because that's where my initial thinking started from. And I think a lot of that will still be there. Oh yeah, so like one of the big things that came out of early playtesting was the idea that the game is less about hitting one number and more about getting the best effects. So essentially, like when you play cards from your hand, you're trying to get a number to succeed in the action. But the strength of your success is determined by the number of cards that are on the table. So for every card that is used to get to your goal, you get 1 point of effect. And the only way predominantly to get other cards is from help from other people. And so as crew members do their actions, you can use their cards in your actions. So as an example, in combat, the commander can give an order of suppressing a machine gun nest and gives a card to the gunner, or not the gunner, the bow gunner. So the bow gunner on his turn fires the 30 on a suppression action on the infantry. So they play a card and shoot up that infantry. But then it comes back, and then the gunner on the tank, like on the main gunner, if he decides to shoot the same thing, well, he can see the tracer fire from the machine gun. So he can grab a card from whatever orders he got from the commander. He can take a card from the machine gunner up front who's already taken his shots and use that to sight his gun. And then when he plays his card, he is more like not only is more likely to succeed, but he's much more likely to have a higher effect. And so the effect basically details how much damage you do, but also from a structural component, in terms of rules, the idea of like when you succeed, the effect is the number of choices you get. So like if you think about Powered by Apocalypse, where it's like, okay, 4 things happen, right? Like you can either pin down the enemy, you can the enemy can't engage you, you wing them with gunfire, something like that, right? And so if you, for each point of effect you had, you could pick more of these options. So if you had a 3-point effect, you would pin the enemy down, they can't shoot back at you, and you inflict harm. And that kind of idea in terms of the way the game plays. Sorry, talk a lot.
No, that's great. So the aspect of cooperation particularly interests me. So would that be reinforced by the actions they can do, or is it just the nature of the cards themselves?
Well, it's the nature of the actions that they do. So, so the values of the cards. So, for effect purposes, a 1 is as powerful as a 10. It's just the card's presence itself. The values of the cards are what's getting you to your actual hit, which is whatever number is determined by like the opposition or whatnot, which is in this case the GM. So, if I need a 7 to hit something, whether that be a tank or whether in a social engagement or something like that, like I can hit it with a 6 from my own hand and get an effective 1, or I could get inspiring words from my commander and I would get the value of the card that they gave me, but I would also get, more importantly, I would get that card as an effect bonus, so that the more people that work basically universally through the game, if we all work together, we get a better result. Since like one of the sort of core conceits of the game, of course, is since it's a tank crew, it's kind of like 3 to 5 people you're a party that can't not leave each other, right? Like you're a group of fantasy soldiers, shields surrounding each other and moving as a unit across the battle. You can't, if one person decides to run, they're dead, or would have to be, right? So there's no reason anyone would do this. And so like I thought of it as kind of like the ultimate party game kind of thing. And that seems to be going well. And in terms of giving myself constraints, it's part of it is balancing, I guess, realism with story. I know one thing that Jason Morningstar mentioned to me with working on a game like this is that, if it's between the game and history, the game has to always win, because we're playing to have fun, or whatever fun is, but we're playing for engagement. I always think that's a better word for game. When you're doing RPGs, you want engagement, because fun is impossible to tell. I can't tell your fun and John's fun are 2 different things, but I can generally tell when either of you are interested in something that's going on. And so ultimately, I want people to be engaged in the game. And so far, the combat elements seem to engage people well, and so then I have to make that work. I have character creation, which is virtually non-existent. I have constant questions in my head of, well, maybe this should just be a card game and not a role-playing game. And my answer right now is beep off. It's a role-playing game because I want it to be. Really, is the short answer, I guess. Like I could totally probably re-engineer this game into just strictly a card game. But I don't think. It just wouldn't be fun for me. I want to play a role-playing game, and basically this game is Fury, the RPG. So that's my hope, anyway.
Where do you want the people role-playing? Like, where does the role-play fit?
Well, I think so. The role-play is probably crew scenes, like in the tank, near the tank. role playing with, I mean, like war games are a little tricky, right? Because like, you know, you're obviously not exactly role playing with the opposition forces. But so like that's why I think the role playing is more within the company, because the company is moving through the war, right? Like everything's moving in this game. You know, you're not staying in one place too long. So any story you tell is going to be moving. Like you'll be in one place and then you'll be into another town or whatever. So there'd be like, you know, I think if I focus the role playing scenes into after the fight or before the fight, and then structure that, okay, well, the company's more or less always with you, maybe unless you end up estranged from them. But you know, in that sense, there would be a supply of NPCs in terms of other people who are with you, including infantry and yada 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 yada. And you would have locals, and so on and so forth. So I mean, I think there's plenty of role playing opportunities there. But you're right. Like I need to determine where that role playing is coming from, right?
Well, do you think that like a structured is not the right word, an order of scenes, right? Like you have X number of crew scenes pre-combat, then combat, because you know the combat part works. So you have X number of role play scenes, crew scenes, whatever you want to call them, pre-combat. Then you have combat as sort of the fulcrum or the hinge at which all this stuff takes a turn, and then you can have the fallout of combat affect the post combat crew scenes, because oh man, what do we do if our bow gunner has been severely injured?
Yeah, so
that's certainly going to affect our dynamic around the table.
So what I'm sort of thinking of, like my current working model is like what Blaze in the Dark does, where if the combat is the job, then we have free role playing where it's like us in the tank, it's us with the company, it's us in the city that we just blew up or whatever. Then we all decide, okay, we're going to do this engagement. We're going to defend this town, or we're going to try to take the next one, or who knows what. And so then there's an engagement scene, which is, you know, the whole battle royale. And then from that, we fall back into like what happens afterwards, and that sort of plays out with the company. And then we sort of fall back into that fairly simple loop. So I'm not thinking about as much like you have to have 2 scenes before you go into a combat, and then you have 3 scenes after that. I'm more thinking of that sort of free-flowing kind of dynamic, which may come back and bite me in the ass. But
well, my question with anything that free-forming is, how do you know when it's done?
I don't know. I mean, when it pushes back, I think that's the other thing too. Is you can't, like it's war, right? So, if the GM is an oppositional force in this game, so you know the Germans aren't waiting. So, you know, the engagement can push into you. Maybe, I don't know.
Sure.
You're being pushed out to the front, or
yeah, and I mean, I have part of my idea was sort of mapping out sort of overall scenarios. So like the core story I want to tell is like, you know, let's say everything from D-Day landing through the Normandy breakout, which is like about a month and change or so. So that allows like all sorts of different stories of going through different places. I could make a physical map, which is like, so, you know, we land here and we're going to have engagements here, here, and here, and we're going to tell stories between these spaces or something like that. So
I wonder if something like a engagement token economy might be interesting to explore, where you sort of go into combat debt the more you don't fight. You know, in terms of the fiction, you spend all this time on leave, and eventually your superiors are going to kick your ass and throw you into the fight. But as you expend scenes or like role-playing scenes, flavor scene,
yeah, whatever you want to call them.
Through, and as you expend those, you add character flavor, you add story flavor, but then you incur sort of a campaign progression debt that has to be paid through progressing the front, the combat aspect of it. And you have to go into some sort of engagement to sort of get that freedom for leave time, because the opposition is pushing you back. So giving the allies less freedom to do the leave activities.
Right, and you can't. It would be hard, for instance, to earn leave if you've been ducking combat, if you've been, avoiding your part of the, hey, go flank the Germans. If you skipped out on that, well, you are actively causing detriment to other people. So yeah, I think there's something there in the idea of some kind of deficit where
sort of
you
like
are.
It's a work-life balance,
Yeah.
Yeah, balance.
But I do agree with you. Like having a hard line of three role-playing scenes and then combat, 3 role-playing scenes and then combat. That's I don't feel that's going to work in terms of flow. Like something a little bit more dynamic.
Yeah.
Take, I think might be very interesting to explore.
Yeah, like, so one of the ideas that I'm thinking of is like supply and logistics is really important, but sort of generalizing that obviously by a lot. But like, if supply is low, like supply could be garnered through role-playing scenes, through like, everything from stealing shit to working with other people to get things or whatnot. And so as an element of an economy, the supply, like if you stay in one spot too much, or you like if you're not achieving objectives, you're not winning the war, you're getting pushed back or something like that. I don't know exactly, but something like that.
Yeah, this is getting out of tabletop land, but it's reminding me of This War of Mine, where they're civilians, but they're trying to survive in a war zone.
What's it called?
This War of Mine.
Okay. Is it a computer game?
Yes. It's on a number of different platforms. But you play a household of individuals in a war zone, trying to get enough resources to survive. And during the day, you're sort of in the household and building things and dealing with whatever happens. Somebody gets sick or somebody is hurt, and somebody needs to build a stove or cook food or whatever. At night, one person has to go out scavenging to get enough supplies for the rest of the household. It's a really dark and depressing game because never enough resources, people die.
Yeah.
You have to sacrifice people. You have to make these hard choices. But
that sounds really interesting. It's definitely something I'm gonna go look up, because I like, certainly that's like the Gray Ranks or something like that. Where it's like, let's play the world's most depressing role-playing game. But it's still really good for that thing. Like, and I certainly want a game that gets people in the feels a bit. I'm not. I don't think this is the game that's going to be like the, gets my players bursting into tears and shit. That's hard for me. But I know some people love that though.
I just realized, I just remembered that This War of Mine became a tabletop game this year.
Oh yeah.
We made a board game version of it 2 or 3 months ago.
Okay.
But same story, same theme, same.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google the shit out of this after this.
Yeah,
So.
it's not role playing by any means, but it's. Think of my impression. I haven't played it, the tabletop version. My impression was think of Dead of Winter, but more depressing. No zombies.
Yeah, see, so maybe it's slightly counterintuitive, but I mean, potentially if supply is expended in role-playing scenes,
yeah,
but gained in engagement scenes, or something like that, you know, so that we, now, I mean, obviously, maybe it could be gained in role-playing scenes too. Like there's an economy, there's a resource that pushes the drama from combat to dramatic action and back and forth. So that I think no matter what, it needs to be a scarce resource, but every now and then would be abundant.
I feel like the Fantasy Flight, Star Wars RPG, and Genesis, they have the light side, dark side points.
Yeah, like so if you do a thing, it becomes a GM resource kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea for what they do. It's like these are the super ability points, and the players can use it to break a rule for in their favor, and then it becomes a GM point. But you can sort of apply that kind of mechanic for I guess off-camera scenes, on-camera scenes,
mm-hmm.
Engagement versus lead, however you want to term it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that give and take. Sounds compelling. I would play it.
Cool. I think we've probably blown any time limit we were supposed to have.
Probably. We usually start about like half an hour per person.
Okay.
Oh,
but
well, shit.
What? John? Did you have something else?
No, I'm good. I had not looked at the clock until you just said that. I'm like, oh, it's only been like 15, 20 minutes, right? No, it has not been 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm fine, thank you.
I have to stay up late tonight because I'm gonna try to get one of those Star Wars Hoth jackets from Columbia because I've just decided it's gonna be my if I can manage it. What? What are you laughing at?
I'm very amused. Knowing what I know of you and the people around you, I'm very amused at your efforts to stay awake long.
Is midnight.
For this. This isn't... Yeah,
it's also midnight.
We're old people, Mark. We're old. It counts. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, this isn't, oh, I'm hanging on the couch with the controller playing, Destiny. It's, what are you doing up? Oh, I'm getting this coat. Like, I am all in for this jacket, you guys.
Yeah. How to tell you've hit 40.
Which jacket is it? Which jacket is it?
So Columbia has this thing where they're doing 1980.
Right.
So it's like they have Luke's jacket and Leia's jackets, which are very functional kind of jackets with sort of vesty kind of styles, right?
You're and then getting the Han Solo, aren't you?
Yeah, the Han Solo is the Hoth kind of pull-up thing.
Yeah.
Hell yes. They changed the color from brown to blue, which I think is just a fashion decision because brown jackets are like very, very old.
Wait. We have a problem with brown jackets now? Andy, I'm really sorry. We're going to talk about this.
A brown parka, okay.
What's the matter with brown parkas?
I don't know. I'm just...
John, do you have a brown parka?
I'm trying to defend their decision.
No, I've never in my life owned a parka. So, I'm just wondering where the brown parka hate comes from.
I've had a black jacket for like my whole life, so Keller's hard.
I mean, I own a very nice full-length brown coat. I wear it in the winter. It keeps me warm, but it is in no way a parka, and I certainly won't shit on other parka people.
Okay. So anyway, so it's blue.
So you're gonna stay up and get the Han Solo coat.
That's my goal. Apparently, I imagine it will be expensive, and I've heard some quotes. But the quotes
now,
also,
are you also
like, as a Canadian, the quotes sound completely in line with a good jacket. And the other thing is like, I imagine some people want to get this thing to, like, I don't know, keep it and hang it on a thing. I want to get it to wear it to work. So,
now my next question would be: are you going to get, say, the Princess Leia coat for people in your life?
No, because I don't have that much money.
That's kind of a dick move there, Mark. I'm just saying it's kind of a dick move. Hey, person in my life, look at my coat that I didn't get for you.
Yeah, well.
I don't know. You got to live with them, man. I don't know. It's just a coat.
I got Christmas and Hanukkah. Okay, this shit gets expensive around here.
Yeah, that's true. It's Hanukkah now, isn't it?
Because you
Tuesday. Sorry, way off track.
I think we're reasonably close to wrapping up anyway. Do you have any other tread things to talk about, or?
I don't think so.
Do they have parkas?
They had actually the tank. Seriously, sure. They didn't have parkas, but tankers in general were like the few people who, like, they're in their formal like uniform. They had like winter coats because it gets really freaking cold in a tank, or could. And but of course, their coats were vied for by everybody else too. So like, there's some elements of the game that I'm definitely never going to like. I think the hardest part with this game is replicating some sense of realism and not wanting to everybody die instantaneously, but also it's very easy to get caught into, like, the massive wargaming sphere that exists. And so I certainly don't plan for this game to appease a wargamer's appetite, in terms of, say, like, this game's not going to feel like Squad Leader, but I think that if you enjoy a D&D battle, like, that this would be appealing.
That is the history of D&D, right? It came out of wargamers that didn't want to do wargaming.
Yeah, and then people went back the other way too. So yeah, like, the game's not tracking every shell of ammunition and things like that. So there's definitely some more sort of indie elements of, like, we're not going to worry about the strictest, how many bullets you fired and stuff like that. But and I'm not going to worry about angular deflection. And I've learned so much about tanks.
Gotta get that parabola arc going.
It's unbelievable the amount of stuff. I have a stack of books behind me, and, like, I have books on tanks versus very specific kinds of tanks. I have an entire book that's all it is it's just the history of the American bazooka. And then I have another one which is the Panzerfaust and Panzerstrike, and they're fascinating, but super, like, it gets overwhelming when you get down that road. So I want, like, the flavor of this, but not, I don't want to have people making that detailed tactical decisions. Like, I want the game so that I do a thing, this represents our tanks thing, done next round, kind of thing, so that combat is fluid and moving. I don't want to have people kind of hanging, we're going to hang 10 while the bard figures out what song he's picking. I want the game to be sort of moving fairly quickly. So I don't know. It's tricky. It's fun. Parts of it.
Great. So I have one last thing that I thought of. So I have this sort of prototype game that I wrote on the plane to PAX Unplugged. And it's a game about making games. So
Okay.
we're gonna try this.
This sounds depressing already.
Yeah, it's great. So the idea is one of the players is the game developer, and the rest of the players are producers with money, and they ask questions of the game developer. Typically, yes or no questions only. Well, not typically. They are yes or no questions only. But I'll start with the theme here and draw a couple of playing cards. I have a nice handy dandy lookup chart.
Ooh.
This has to be video games because other people are giving somebody money.
Yes, this is video games. Yes. So we got 6 of diamonds and jack of spades, which gives me a text-based puzzle game with a text-based puzzle game about unstable FBI agents.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay, so ask me questions. Or a question.
Does it have loot boxes?
Okay, so I draw a card to find out how I should answer that. Yes, but the loot boxes.
Oh.
Yes, but the loot boxes are purchased with stuffed animals.
Okay.
Sounds like a
I'm
very
still
bad
in. I'm still in.
Okay.
Wait, so where do you get the stuffed animals from?
That doesn't matter, Mark.
No, this does.
Well, ask me a yes or no question, Mark.
Yes or no question. You know, geez, a text-based, text puzzle-based,
text-based puzzle game about adorable, or no, about unstable AI agents.
Do you pick why they're unstable?
Let me draw my card here. Oh, okay. So I turn. So with that result, I turn that back to you and ask you a yes or no question. Sorry, what was your question again?
So do you determine their instability? Like, do you pick their instability?
So my clarifying question back to you is, by instability, do you mean emotional instability? So you can have, no? Then of course I do. You determine that they're unstable by determining how much uranium is contained within them to figure out how it decays over time.
John's dying over on his channel.
Oh, this is great.
Now I'm
this
seeing that people are because I represent the money, so you have to adhere to my demands, right? I guess is the idea.
So how the answers work is you draw a card and it's just based off of the suit. Every single one of the answers is some variation of yes and. So with hearts, it's just straight up yes and. Spades, it's yes but. Clubs, it's ask a clarifying yes or no clarifying question, and then you answer yes and diamonds are we're working on that one, and then you offer another alternative that matches.
But the funny thing is you can never say no.
No, you cannot say no.
Yeah, so you're always building some monstrous game.
Yeah.
Oh, this sounds really good. I keep working on this because this sounds like a lovely party game.
Yeah,
oh God, yeah.
It's gonna be my next mini game.
Oh man, yeah, that game sounds like something you could put kids through college on. So fun games, jeez.
Yes. So yeah,
I mean, card games certainly hit that sweet spot. Like, it's, you know, if you can figure them out, because there's like tight bit of so like cards. Sorry to interrupt, but or you keep going.
No, go ahead, keep going.
So like the thing is, cards, like from a realistic making a game perspective, like one of the things that we have to look at is how much is it going to cost to make this game, you know, and also how difficult is that to sell. I mean, you know, like one of the things with, say, a role-playing game, for example, is if as a constraint, if I use normal bicycle cards, these are really easy to get. Anyone can get them anywhere. I can assume that my players can get them very easily. So then I can sell them a book. But if I'm making a custom deck and a book, then I have to sell my client custom cards and a book, and I have to pack them together probably, and then is that in a box? And Jesus Christ, why am I doing this? You know, like,
yeah, unless you can like distill the rules down to a couple of cards
to a small thing, right? So can you get the rules small enough that they fit in a card of things? Can you do them a different way? Like, so some games the cards are purely aesthetic. And so you end up with cards where, you know, like there's a big, huge deck from Night Witches, for example, but you certainly don't need cards to play Night Witches with. It's just evocative and cool. Yeah. There's games where there's some games like, you know, you can do like I sell the cards, but the game is free online, right? Like, so you get like
Derek Gore's Hope in Humanity is like that.
Yeah.
I think Jason Morningstar has one Juggernaut that's most of the rules are contained within the cards themselves.
Yeah, and the game about the Civil War, I think. What's the name of that? I think it's the Civil War.
What, Carolina Death Crawl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so it's like the cards, like the game, you can just download, anyone can download the PDF, but in order to play the game, you need the cards. And so, I mean, there's different ways you can do that, certainly. And I mean, I think, but that's the thing, like, you have to think, it certainly is in the decision-making of designing a game, because it has to be, you know, practical to play it, practical to sell it. And, you know, like, I think in the, like, from the content, like, I'm aiming to design a game which has, like, a book, printable character sheets, printable worksheets, and plays with cards. And then I would probably imagine, like, doing, like, because it seems natural to do a custom deck of cards for the game as, like, a thing that you could have that is cooler and more tailored to it, or maybe just featured a bunch of tank art. But I wouldn't be, like, a hard contingent kind of thing. You know, but I think those are things that you have to think about when you're making games. Like, if like, from the perspective of not just, you know, something fun to play.
Absolutely. All right. I think we're pretty much done for time. Any last words? You want to say where people can find your stuff?
Sure. John, you want to go first?
Absolutely, I want to go first. Let me get a word in edgewise. So, yeah, you can find all my stuff at two places, writernextdoor.com or on Twitter. You can find me at awesome, AWESOME _JOHN. Those are the two main places to find me.
I too have a website. You can see a lot of my cartography work at greenhatdesigns.com. You can find more about Headspace at headspacerpg.com. And I live and breathe on Twitter at Slave to the Hat. And I'm always around. So that's the best place to find me.
And for my part, you can find all the GM Party related things you want to find at gmparty.com. You can find me at Andy Burdan, and most of my personal stuff is at burdan.ca. Actually, there's a micdropgame.com for the game that we talked about today. And I think that wraps it up.
Cool.
Next time.